Comic Timing is a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network.
Welcome to episode 12 of Comic Timing, a comics podcast devoted to the average comic book fan from the average comic book fan. Join in as David Price and myself, Ian Levinstein, discuss whatever comes to mind, time after time, here on Comic Timing. Well, we're back from a week-long hiatus and are joined this time around by the other Man of 1,000 podcast, Derek Coward of the Deliberate Noise Network, to discuss comics in the 90s, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We go from Valiant to Image to Liefeld to McFarlane to Milestone to the Ultraverse, and all the way back round again. And yeah, we even briefly mentioned the Clone Saga. It happened, folks. Here now, Comic Timing.
We're recording. We're really recording. Oh my god, we're recording. It's episode 12 of Comic Timing. Snafu last time around, but this time it will be even better than the unheard ramblings of yesterday. My name's Ian Levinstein, alongside my partner, the Man of 1,000 podcast.
Hello.
He is David Price. Hello, hello. And joining us today, he is a man of many podcasts himself, of the Noise Network. He is Deliberate Noise, he's Comic Book Noise, he's Movie Noise, and a whole bunch of other things thrown in there, and he is Derek Coward.
How are you doing
today,
How are
Derek?
you and David doing tonight?
Not too bad. So far, so good.
Yeah, doing pretty well. Enjoying the fact that it's not nearly as hot today, so turning off the fan and all that so I can record is not killing me, so yay. Oh, boy. First of all, before we get going, just tell the listeners a bit about what you do every week on Comic Book Noise.
Well, you asked me this yesterday, and I also paused. Well, actually, it's a one-man show. Pretty much, I just talk about whatever pops into my head. Every few shows or so, I try to do what's called a random comic review, where I will go into my collection and just pick a comic book at random, and I'll review it. And I also try to do top 5 lists, but I try to stray from the norm and think of ones that not a whole lot of people have talked about before. That's pretty much what I do.
Which is a good way to get people to read stuff that they've never heard of before, so yay.
Does it well too.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Yes, you do definitely do a great job, and I've listened to it many a time, and, well, you're yet another one of those podcasts that, makes me think, I should go out and buy this, and, before I know it, I have even emptier pockets, so
You're
thank
welcome.
you, my friend. That's what we're here for. Yeah, so the reason why we have Derek on tonight is he presented a show topic to us on the Comic Tomic forums that we basically could not pass up because, well, in the past, I've badmouthed Rob Liefeld, and in the past, we've sort of made some jokes about the 90s and all that. And with this episode here, we want to focus on the 90s and today. With contributions that popular artists like Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane made to the comic book industry back in the 90s that made our hobby one of the hottest around, why is it that once the speculator bubble burst, they are getting most of the blame? What is it about this era that irks you the most? Is there anything in particular you feel comics benefited from in the 90s that they still benefit from today? And most of all, is there anything done in the 90s you would like to see back in the comics of today? And, well, before we talk about Liefeld and before we talk about McFarlane, I feel that they're really associated with the speculator era, and the speculator era sort of began with Valiant Comics, which started in 1989 and was founded by Jim Shooter and Bob Layton and Barry Windsor Smith and Exo-Man of War, and a whole bunch of other comics came out of there. Now, with Valiant Comics, their whole idea was doing low print runs, which is kind of the complete opposite of what happened with the McFarlane and Liefeld, but it did sort of begin the speculator era. David, I know that you were a fan of the Valiant Comics. What was it that drew you to Valiant Comics in the first place? I mean, was it the fact that they could be worth something someday?
It was the stories. It was great stories. It's really good artwork. It didn't talk down to me when I was reading them. I didn't, and it was it was also new. I was getting in on the ground floor with these stories, with these comics, with these characters. Whereas I knew Spider-Man, I knew Superman, but I didn't have 25, 30, 50 years worth of history to go along with it. This was all brand new, and it was unique, and it was just a really nice, good reads.
Which is something that, people are drawn to, and that was one of the reasons why everybody sort of caught on to Valiant Comics. But they were, on the ground floor with the ideas of, hey, we want to make these worth something as opposed to just being reads. And I mean, they had their, the chromium covers and the, the holofoil and metallic and so on and so forth. And they were sort of the forerunners with that. And also, they did sell. I mean, Turok Dinosaur Hunter 93 sold 1.75 million copies. That sort of said something right there. But people were buying it for two reasons. And, I mean, Derek, I know that you didn't really get to read too much of the Valiant comics back in the day, but what do you think about the whole idea of making comics worth something along with the story behind it?
I actually think that's good in theory, but in a lot of the execution, people do it all wrong. They will go out and they will buy something that is hot, that everybody else has, which, come on, I think we all took economics in high school. There's a whole law of supply and demand. What a lot of people have done is they have taken the hobby, commoditized it, and then, they get kind of ticked off when this thing that they thought was going to put their kids through college or, as their retirement nest egg, turns out to be just another comic book.
And folks out there that, did not sell them right off the bat, well, it is just another comic book these days. You can usually get Valiant Comics for about, $1 or $2 these days at random, comic conventions. Back in the day, these things were worth hundreds and hundreds of dollars because they were just that big at the time.
Yeah, and if that company had stayed in business, then they probably would still be that big because of the low print runs. But, now they're out.
Yeah, that was certainly the case there. And with Valiant Comics came the idea of, buy them for a reason other than just reading them. Talk about buying things for a reason other than just reading them. Rob Liefeld was one of the guys who sort of started that off as well. And with his New Mutants run back in the 80s, at the time, it wasn't much about the Speculator. That was sort of just his new style. And, David, I know that you were a reader of the New Mutants comics. What was that drew you to Rob Liefeld in the first place?
It was splashy. It was, later on we find out it was style with not much substance. It was different. I don't know, there was a kinetic feeling. It was this frenzy. It was just something that you really weren't too used to seeing in a standard, normal Marvel bullpen produced comic book.
Or anything, period. I mean, he had that, when I look at Rob Liefeld's art, and I mean, again, I might not be the biggest fan of his, but there's sort of a future tech feel to it. Like this feels like something that's sort of like a next generation of comic books, with all the guns and all the straps and all that. Back in the early 90s, back in the late 80s, future tech was in, with the Terminator and with all those other, sort of futuristic stuff that was sort of popular at the time. You could see why Rob Liefeld's style sort of caught on.
I could see that.
Yeah, because hey, guns are awesome. Even as a kid, I thought that. I mean, come on, sure, I'm not saying go out there and start using guns, obviously, but no, I'm saying that looking at guns, seeing all these different styles of firearms, you can see why people might have caught on to that at the time. With New Mutants, that was the beginning, and Derek, you also were a New Mutants appreciator, and there was a major difference also between his New Mutants and the New Mutants that came before that. When given a choice between the Claremont New Mutants and the Byrne New Mutants and all that, and Liefeld's New Mutants, which do you choose?
I would choose the Liefeld New Mutants simply because they were exciting, and it wasn't the same old stuff. Because before Liefeld came on the New Mutants, they were boring. They were just another generic X team around the time when the X-Men were losing their steam, and they were not good. The stories weren't all that compelling. How many times could they tell the same story of somebody appearing to die when actually they just disappeared into a different dimension, right? Or that the one saying that I can remember on at least 2 occasions, probably more, which is, welcome to the X-Men, insert mutant name here, hope you survive the experience, or something like that.
Yep.
I mean, and after a while, they were doing the same things over and over again. They were introducing really lame concepts like Bird Boy and I must be the only person in the world who did not like the Fall of the Mutants storyline. I did not.
You didn't like Fall of the Mutants, really?
I thought that.
Actually, I don't think you were alone there. I remember reading a couple of issues. Was that the whole big Madeline Pryor reveal?
No. That was
okay.
That was Inferno.
That this.
What was Fall of the Mutants?
Yeah, that was Inferno.
Fall of the Mutants was when they the X-Men supposedly died, but like a couple issues later they appeared in Australia.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was during the Silvestri era.
Right. And
okay.
It was the death of Doug Ramsey and all that kind of goodness.
Is that when we were introduced to Patch, Logan's other persona?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe that's when that first came into play. Yeah. And also that was when when Angel lost his wings for the first time?
That was the Mighty
Mutant
Mutant Massacre.
Of something different?
Which was
Mutant Massacre was good.
All right.
Mutant Massacre was all right. I didn't understand why Thor was.
Thank you. Yes.
Was in it.
Okay. but it will always. But I will always love those issues of Uncanny, drawn by Alan Davis.
Yeah.
Yes, without a doubt. And again, like we've talked about this before, Alan Davis goes to a comic book, right away we're going to read it because, well, Alan Davis's art is just outstanding. But that's another issue for another time. So you weren't too happy with what was going on, so that's why you were glad to see why
because it was new, it was different. He was taking the whole concept of comic book art and putting a little bit more of the art into it. You know, I mean, yeah, his people may have not been anatomically correct all the time, but, you know, neither was Bill Sienkiewicz's artwork or Kelly Jones or a lot of people. I mean, the greatest example of art, of anatomy not matching, art not matching anatomy is one of the most beloved figures of all time, and that's Charlie Brown. I mean, take a really good look at that guy's melon, all right?
Yeah.
So I'm willing to forgive some of these things because he was also he introduced a lot of different concepts in art that, like I said, nobody was doing at the time.
Yeah, and also think about the fact that you talk about anatomy not matching. How many times has Superman been drawn with this, gigantic chest, and the rest of his body is not nearly as large?
Quite frankly, that doesn't make sense. I remember reading someplace where somebody said that they usually draw Batman and Superman the wrong way. Superman, who doesn't have a bladder resistance, shouldn't have all this big body mass. He should be built like an acrobat, and Batman should be built like a brick house. But they usually do it the other way around.
And you can also say the same thing about the Flash. I mean, whether it was Barry Allen or Wally West or any of the Flashes, you would think, which is something I'll give John Byrne credit for, he drew Danny with these huge, massive upper thigh legs. Upper thighs, and it just made sense. Why would you not have super huge, overdeveloped leg muscles if you run fast?
Right.
Of course. Yeah, and think of how often they're running, too. I mean, they're running all over the place, I mean, I know for myself, the most exercise that I do is walking. My most powerful muscles in my entire body are my lower legs. Oh, man. And, I mean, with Rob Liefeld, well, hey, as long as Rob Liefeld doesn't draw, necks or legs, he's good. So that's all I'm saying there. But anyway, finally you get to X-Force, which was the bagged issues. Now, right away, the idea of putting a issue inside of a bag, and that if you take it outside of the bag, then the value is going to go down. Right away, this is saying you're buying this issue to buy this issue and not to read what's inside of it. If you look at the cover is actually a pretty enticing cover, which is not something you can say too often about Rob Liefeld, but it's kind of interesting. You got the whole group shot thing going on. You got Cable standing there, a little bit hunched over, with Boom Boom right behind him, and the name of the wolf character escapes me. Wolfsbane. There you go, Wolfsbane, right next to him. And they're interesting. You're thinking, hey, what's up with this team? I mean, they were the New Mutants. Now they're different. They're evolved. What's going on here? And Cable also. Cable's a very interesting character. Always has been. I'm glad they didn't go with the name. What was it? Commander X, I think at first was what they were thinking about naming him in the early stages. And think of how much worse he would have been had he been Commander X for most of his life. Yet another character.
Couldn't have been any worse than G.W. Bridge. Which, again, and I'll say this like I said when Amy was on the show, that might be a great and catchy name if you live in like Tennessee or Iowa, but if you're a New York resident or living anywhere in the tri-state area, it just sounds goofy.
Well, hey, I'm just glad that they didn't bring on, Satellite to be one of the competitors for cable. Because that would have been really annoying. Or,
That's it, yeah.
Or DirecTV or Dish Network. Cable is battling the evil Dish Network, who is... Oh, God. But anyway, okay, I know that all of you have every single version of this X-Force comic, or at least had one at one time or another. Was it 5 different...
4 of which I believe were single... Just one single person, whether it was Cable or Sunspot and Cannonball, and then the 5th card was a Group X-Force shot.
Okay, yeah, and I have the Group X-Force shot, and I think I might have the Cable one, but the Cable one's the one I took out of the bag, if I remember correctly. Funny story, my hair cutter, for some reason that to this day I'm not entirely sure, he was a comic book fan when he was a kid, for one of my birthdays, got me X-Force #1 about 10 years after the fact, so this must have been about 2003, and thought that it would be this nice present to give me, and I'm like, exactly, yeah, I'm like, wow, hey, great, you got me X-Force #1.
I ran out of toilet paper.
Bottom of the pile. Oh, hello there. Well, yeah, I mean, it was all nice and flashy on the outside. When you opened it up, did you guys enjoy X-Force #1 as a comic book itself?
At the time, yeah, I think I did. I mean, I wouldn't have continued buying it for another couple issues. At the time, I wasn't buying comics going, gee, I hope this gets better. I was buying comics, I was reading them, I was buying them mostly for the art at the time. The characters were interesting, but I remember following artists a lot back in the day. And it wasn't a bad story. I mean, you had Domino, you had Shield. I mean, it was good. I from what I remember, I mean, I might cringe if I found them this weekend in Chicago and was flipping through them at a dealer's table and going, holy crap. But, at the time, I do remember reading it, and I do remember enjoying it.
I've always been more of a writer's fan, and since this was basically an art book, I really didn't have high hopes for it, but the pictures were nice.
Okay.
I'm not gonna be one of those people who is just now gonna say, oh, it was like one of the worst pieces of crap I ever read, because I'm sorry, that goes to actually an issue of American Flag that I don't want to talk about.
Oh, okay. Was it a Shaken issue?
No, this was a Badger issue.
Oh, okay.
It was
okay.
actually the last Badger issue that he drew. So I guess he already cashed his check because he put absolutely no effort into it.
Yeah. We'll be talking about Rob Liefeld's own flag waiver fighting American at one point or another during this episode, but oh dear God. As a kid, I'll admit this, okay? I was young when this came out. I'm the youngest of the 3 on this podcast right now. So when I picked up X-Force #1, when I picked it up for the first time, I really, really liked the pretty pictures. I thought, hey, these guys look really cool. Hey, Cable has a glowing eye. I want a glowing eye. That would be really awesome to have. And hey, Boom Boom, she looks kind of interesting. I want to keep reading this. And I'm thumbing through it, and I'm sure when I was younger, I didn't really look too much at the words. These days, I went back and I read X-Force #1 about 3 years ago, and I'm like, this used to be one of my favorite comic books when I was a kid. What the hell was I thinking? Because when you actually sit down and read the thing, it doesn't really hold up.
Basically saying they won't be doing the Essential X-Force anytime soon.
If they do, it'll probably be the post-Liefeld era. At least that's what I'm thinking. Although, with Marvel, they might very well have.
Well, they're up to X Factor already, which surprises me because you can get most of those issues for less than what they charge for an Essentials.
Yeah, although I did actually, I picked up the Essentials Peter David with the first couple of Peter David issues of X Factor because I just felt it would be easier.
Is that Essentials or Visionaries?
Tracking down the issues.
Okay.
Excuse me, that's Visionaries. Okay, yeah, Visionaries X Factor. I
that would be worth it.
That was actually really good. They could do a Visionaries.
Oh, I'm sure they could.
And have a couple of New Mutants, a couple of X-Force in there, and throw it in there. But still, I mean, this is the sort of issue that you bought to buy it, not to read it, really. And that's the way that was back then. You look at, for example, Jim Lee's X-Men #1. Okay, this was the adjectiveless years. You had X-Force, you had X-Men, you had Spider-Man, which we'll get to later. X-Men #1 sold a hell of a lot of copies, and I know that you two have every single cover of X-Men #1, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Or I did, but yes.
And I've got up on my wall, I've had up on my wall for years now. It's been the one part of my wall that has not changed in about 10 years. Everything else has. I used to live in a room covered in Yankee posters. That's not what it is anymore. But the one poster that has been exactly on my wall ever since I got it was the fold-out poster inside of X-Men #1 that Jim Lee did. I bought a second copy of that just so that I would have one where I didn't rip off the cover. And the other one I obviously did rip off the cover, but that was an amazing, amazing poster. Seriously, to have like every single X-Man, member of X-Factor, X-Force, Excalibur at the time was a pretty thing to have on your wall, and it's still up there, and it still holds up over time. The issue itself, not Claremont's best. It's great Jim Lee art, but again, that was the art years of comic books. We're not really in that stage anymore.
Now, can anybody tell me if the Claremont Whilce Portacio Uncanny X-Men was a better read than the standard X-Men?
Actually, I read that at the time, and I read that later on, and I basically there was this one time where I went through my entire collection and like read all of those 93, 94, 91 issues, that sort of thing, and went back to those storylines to see whether or not they held up. The Uncanny actually held up better than the X-Men or the X-Force.
Okay.
What about you, Derek?
I didn't even know that Whilce was on the X-Men.
He took over because Jim Lee went from Uncanny to X-Men, so they still wanted one of their young guns to do the X-book, so they gave it to, which is par for the course because Portacio followed the Image founders and tried to put out wet work. So it just went with that whole McFarlane, Larson, Lee.
Okay.
But yeah, no, Whilce Portacio was the artist on Uncanny after Jim Lee.
Wow. Well,
and I learned something today.
Yeah, because around that time is when I had given up on the X-Men simply because I think I called them yesterday the never-ending subplots, and I tapped out. I just couldn't take it anymore.
Well, Claremont is still known for that to this day, actually. So it wasn't nearly as bad then, but this day and age. And by the way, in all seriousness, though, I do hope that Chris Claremont is getting better right now. He has been he has fallen ill, and I hope that he is indeed getting himself back in shape and gets back to form because he is a comic book legend. Whether I've liked every single story he's written is out of the question. I want this guy to get better. I want him to be back writing comics again.
Yeah.
But
he wrote one of the greatest storylines ever with the Dark Phoenix saga.
Yes.
Yeah, so for that alone, he gets my word.
He'll get a pass, even though he came out with Sovereign 7.
Actually, I like Sovereign 7.
and I'm only picking at it because I just remember it on the stands. I never read an issue. That was Dwayne Turner artwork?
Dwayne Turner and then Ron Lim.
Nice. That not bad people to work with.
No.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that I still blame Claremont to this day is his first return after the Jim Lee years to X-Men, when he was writing both Uncanny and X-Men, when he put Rogue as the leader, and when Gambit was the leader of the other squad, and Cable was a member of the team, and Jean Grey was there, and he introduced this, his typical, these are the greatest mutants ever, these are the next evolution of man, the mutants aren't as powerful anymore, but these guys are better, and blah, 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 blah. That's when I sort of got turned off to Claremont. But there have been plenty of Claremont issues since then that I have enjoyed. It's just, actually his Extreme X-Men, I actually really like that. To this day, I'm not entirely sure why I did, but no, he does a great job with LaRocca.
I read his first novel, First Flight. I thought that was really good. I enjoyed that, and I wanted to seek out the additional books from the series. I haven't, and it's something I still plan to rectify. But he's a wonderful writer, and as the longer you're in the game, the more chances there are that not everything is going to be golden. So it's just the law of average.
Definitely, and like we said, get better soon, Claremont. But anyway, let's go on to Todd McFarlane here for a little bit, as well. He is number 2 when it comes to the speculator years. Todd McFarlane, obviously, when his career began, he did some Hulk issues, and I gotta say, actually, the Hulk that he did was I did really enjoy that. when he was on Hulk back in the day, before he got onto
Well,
Spider-Man.
they were running
Amazing
concurrently
Spider-Man
about the same
and all
time.
that.
He was doing both books for a little while, and then then he focused on Amazing with Michelini on writing.
Those were the Gray Hulk.
I don't know if they were all gray. No, I don't think they were all gray. Because I remember the cover with Wolverine, where it was basically Wolverine and versus the Hulk, and I thought that was Greenskin.
Yeah, he did like the beginning of the Gray.
Okay.
Okay.
Before he went
I got you
to Las Vegas. I know he was on the book.
And then from there, he was on concurrently Amazing Spider-Man, and I believe, that was David Michelin. Excuse me, Michelini. See, there we go. You say Michelini, I say Michelin, whatever. Michelini, there we go. And also, see, that's another thing. That's one thing about comic book writers and artists' names. Until you say them out loud, you could screw up their names so terribly. But until you hear their name mentioned by somebody else, and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So, David Michelini and Todd McFarlane. So there you go. But they were doing Amazing Spider-Man, and then finally, Marvel decided, let's give McFarlane his own book, and they gave him adjectiveless Spider-Man. Spider-Man #1 with about 200 different covers and about 200 different prints, and there was a solid gold version of that one, if I'm remembering this correctly, which I think they only had about 100 of those printed, but I said this yesterday and I'll say it today. If you're one of those 100, more power to you. That's all I'm saying. Because to have a solid gold cover to a comic book, I guess it's all up to whether or not you're into that sort of thing. But I'd rather just read it and put it away on a shelf. That one's obviously going to be framed up on a wall and never touched again because it's freaking solid gold, for God's sakes. But this sold, and this sold really, really well. It sold really, really well for the art, not for the story yet again, because, well, the story is kind of lacking. Exactly. Kind of lacking indeed. Everybody here picked up Spider-Man #1 at the time, and at the time, did you think it was nearly as, lackluster a story as it is today to you? Or was it good then?
I did not get it when it first came out. I ended up picking it up towards the end of the speculator market. I got one of the variant covers, one of the high-end variant covers, but I think I got it for like $2, so that just shows you how far the mighty have fallen at the time. I didn't actually read the story until I bought the Torment trade paperback collecting the first 5 issues. And it's in a box in the corner. It can't be buried under enough books deep enough for me to... I mean, it might be interesting to flip through, but I'll never get to it because my Bloom County books are on top of it. My Far Side books are on top. I mean, it's in with good company, but it's not something I'm ready to really just dive in and go, yeah, I need to read me about, Craven with half a head.
I bought it when it first came out, but I didn't get it for years because it looked all right, but it just kind of got off track story-wise.
And it was dark, too. A lot of the printing was dark.
Yeah. And
it was, yeah. And I think on subsequent, and again, I could be wrong with this, but subsequent re-releases of it, it's actually seemed a bit lighter. I'm thinking it might have been the page stock that they put it on originally, but I've seen it in trade paperbacks, and I've seen it in other versions of reprints. I believe Marvel had their 100 greatest stories of all time that they did a couple of years back, and it looked a bit cleaner then than it did when I saw it for the first time.
I really didn't pay too much close attention to the store because I was busy looking for Felix the Cat, because Todd McFarlane at that time liked to draw Felix the Cat in the background of all the comics he did.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Next time you get
I learned something.
Yeah. Next time you get a McFarlane book from around that time, look for Felix the Cat.
Any idea when he started it? Did he start this after his Infinity Inc. days, or was it a Marvel thing?
This, I believe, was just a Marvel thing because he had more power at Marvel.
So, and he could Okay.
Right.
Okay. Did he work him into Spawn #1?
I don't know if it was in Spawn #1, but I do recall seeing Felix the Cat show up in Spawn a couple of times.
Interesting. Neat. Okay.
Interesting indeed. Yeah. Wow. I didn't know that before. And hey, any of you listeners out there who now know this, dig out your McFarlane stuff and start looking for Felix the Cat. All right. David, did you enjoy his Infinity Inc. stuff back then?
What I read of it, yeah, with Mr. Bones and Obsidian and Jade, and yeah, and is it Neutron? The dude with the red mohawk? I did,
Nuclon.
Nuclon, thank you, Jesus. I did like some of it. I enjoyed the Don Newton art, I think, more than the McFarlane art, but that was just because I liked Newton on Detective, and but after McFarlane got on it, I wasn't reading it too often after that. I remember, the issues vaguely, but it wasn't bad. He wasn't quite there yet, but he was getting there.
He's one of those people who has to have a really clean inker, because if he has a muddy inker at all, then his stuff looks bad.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I thought as well, yeah. And this is something that I definitely wanted to touch on, because we mentioned it a little bit yesterday. And apologies to the listeners out there if we continue to say we mentioned this yesterday, because again, this is take 2 here. But we talked about inkers for a little bit yesterday, and we definitely touched about that on Rob Liefeld, and with McFarlane the same thing. When paired with the proper inker, these guys' art did not look too bad. It's just when with the wrong inker, or when they ink their own stuff.
Yeah, like Derek had mentioned previously, Hawk and Dove, and even he said it on his own show, and Hawk and Dove looked great, and I chalk that up to Carl Kessel inking the book. John Byrne looks great with Doug Hazelwood, with Terry Austin, with Jerry Ordway inking his work. I'm not a fan of John Byrne solo. I'm not a fan of... Actually, there are a lot of folks I'm not a fan of when they're by themselves, because a lot of times they'll just...
Quesada.
Yeah. Although Quesada's line is unique enough where I'm not too upset, but there are some inkers like Al Milgram who will ink the penciled page, but they're not changing things too much like Tom Palmer would when he inked John Buscema on the Avengers. You could really tell it was Tom Palmer inking, and
yeah.
It really does. It's not easy to find that perfect or that right inker, because Michael Baer, who was the name you were trying to remember on Identity Crisis, Derek. Michael Baer, when he inked Rags Morales, that worked. But if you put Vinnie Colletta on Jack Kirby, that didn't.
There it is. I was waiting for your Vinnie Colletta comment.
I'm sorry. The man's great at like wood carving, but I mean, if it comes to, he makes a 3-dimensional image look so goddamn flat. It's not even funny. And I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but I don't think he added anything to anybody's pencils. Romeo Tangao on George Perez or Dick Giordano on even Dick Giordano, I don't dislike, but I don't think he was Perez's best inker. But I don't think, and earlier today I found out that Jim Mooney inked Mike Plug on Ghost Rider, and apparently he butchered Jim Mooney's pencils, and this is before the 90s, but I mean, yeah, you can,
really?
According to what I was told by Vince, thank you very much, that you can't even tell it was Mike Plug's pencils under all that, and that's a shame, because Plug has such a unique style that you should be able to spot it a mile away, and for it to be so smothered, it's not even funny. But there's my Colletta comment for the evening.
Yeah, see, most of the time people forget about that. The penciler will get a lot of flack for something that the inker or even the colorist will do to like totally basically destroy what he put out there, and nobody usually goes around saying, "Oh wow, that was a really bad, that was a really bad job that Vinnie Colletta did." Everybody will take a look and say, "Man, what happened to Kirby's artwork?"
Yeah,
because especially if you see it, and if you see Colletta do it, and then the next issue of Fantastic Four you have an ink by like Joe Sinnott, that's night and day.
Oh, sure, yeah, and you know what? Honestly, there's a reason why Jim Lee has been doing, has had the same inker all these years. Lee and Williams do one hell of a job together. And when I've seen Lee inked by other people, it's noticeable. It's really, really.
What I found out is that Scott Williams does Like, he could be drawing someone's cheek, and they have that little black mark right on the cheek. I mean, it could be everything's all clean and nice and white, and he's not cross-hatching, but he's just adding little. It's like he brushed the pen stroke, and it kind of went all over the paperwork. He's even done that to Steve Root artwork, and you could tell that any other inker that would have touched this would not have added these little things. I don't know what it is really, but and one of my favorite inkers, one of my favorite art teams, period, is Alan Davis and Mark Farmer. You can't do no wrong as far as I'm concerned if they're doing the art on your book.
And by the way, it was I don't know his first name, but his last name was Nelson, who did the art.
Yes,
with
on Action
John
by
Byrne
Gail Simone. Yeah.
Yeah, because that was the one that I mentioned as in. When John Byrne drew that, apparently Nelson then went over and almost completely redrew what John Byrne had done. And Byrne is so unhappy with that, where he actually tells his, from what I've heard, he's actually told people, don't pick that up if you want to see John Byrne art.
Well, in this case, he might have a point. I mean, if you have John Byrne doing the artwork, why would you make a whole lot of changes to it?
True, but then again, would I'd like to see I wonder if Liefeld has ever really, or McFarlane even has responded to an inker inking their artwork in a way that they didn't like, and yet the fans liked it.
And I'm wondering if
that's ever happened,
because obviously Byrne still does work for DC. I don't know if that might have been an editorial decision. It could have just been Byrne could have sent in the pages and editorial said maybe McFarlane was just like, I think that this needs to be. It's like when Kirby went to DC and he was drawing Jimmy Olsen, and every time Superman made an appearance, Murphy Anderson redrew the face of Superman just because they wanted Superman to have a uniform look, and Kirby's style didn't fit that.
Well,
so I would think it's more editorial than just hey, we have John Byrne on this book, we really want it to look good, and you're right. If you have John Byrne on the book, if you have Jim Lee on the book, if you have somebody with some sort of name and a following, then you're right. I can definitely see your point.
Well, especially if it's Mike Carlin, who's the editor on that book, because I found out when I was doing research, Hawk and Dove #5, the original miniseries that introduced Rob Liefeld to the world, there was this one sequence where Liefeld decided to change, because the heroes went into like a chaos dimension, he decided to change the orientation so that people would have to turn the book on its side. Well, he did that without getting Carlin's approval.
Oh.
Yeah, so they had to, what was it called, lightboarding the pages. They had to cut the panels and rearrange everything. And that actually, when I found that out and I thought back to that scene, I always thought something was kind of off about it, Yeah, now I know.
Well, now you know. Now you know, and knowing's half the battle. And by the way, I got to say this, considering that I recently, Raging Bullets discovered that Gail Simone listens to them. So if Gail Simone is listening and she wants to chime in on the whole, John Byrne thing, if she knows anything about it, by all means, send us an email over comictiming@gmail.com.
Or you know what?
Anyway,
and I'm going to glom on real quick. If Gail Simone wants to talk to Comic Book Noise.
That's right.
Or to Comic Time.
Or Noise Talk. It doesn't matter. If she just wants to pick up the phone or send an email, by all means.
Exactly.
This past year, she's become one of my favorite writers. I mean,
I've read very little by her.
Yeah, she does.
Unfortunately, I hope to rectify that one of these days. But
if you can, try to pick up her Daredevil/Agent X run.
Okay.
Which was really, really good. Excuse me, Deadpool agent.
I don't know.
Where am I getting Daredevil from?
Because you're jumping ahead. You want to get to the Daredevil armor.
Yeah, right.
One of the best changes to a character.
Well, I do want to talk about Agent X and Soldier X at one point, but that's later on. But anyway, Liefeld ended his run on X-Force with issue 9. He then plotted out to issue 12. Todd McFarlane ended his run with issue 14, and he also did issue 16 of Spider-Man.
My name is in
McFarlane left
the
due to
letters page of issue 16.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, great. So
autograph
anybody who
for
has
you.
issue 16 of Spider-Man, exactly. Yeah, bring it to Chicago, and David will autograph it for you. It'll go up in price.
That's funny.
Yeah.
It'll go up in price.
We can edit that right out.
Oh, come on! You know you love my puns. Anyway, we've got the fact that McFarlane left for two reasons. Number one, apparently due to creative differences, because he had a different editor on the book at that point. Danny Figueroth replaced the editor who was editing it at the time with issue 16, and obviously then Image Comics started up. McFarlane left, obviously, for the same reason. Liefeld left for the same reason. Lee left X-Men for the same reason. Image Comics began. And Image Comics, at the time, was very, very art-oriented. These days, it's a very different company, but let's focus upon the 90s here. Spawn #1, with art by Todd McFarlane in 1992, was one of the best-selling issues of any comic at the time. And Spawn had its appeal. I never really saw the appeal to it, but other people certainly do appreciate Spawn. Are you guys fans?
I sort of lost interest in it when it looked like McFarlane lost interest in it.
Same here.
Okay. Around then was when
it was
it
it was after Capullo started on the art, but as he just started having less and less input in the book. I mean, I don't know if he plots it or when the last time he may have plotted it, but it was well before issue 50 where I'm pretty sure I gave up the ghost.
Yeah, I actually stuck with it probably into the 70s, and then I didn't come back
Stronger man than I.
Well, it was one of those things where it was a habit.
Okay.
Oh, come on! We've all known it. We've done that at least 5 or 6 times in our lifetime.
And
pick up a book
before we get too far into Image, I do, from other interviews that I've read over the years, basically what I got out of Larson, Valentino, Liefeld, Lee, McFarlane, and Portasio, and Dale Keown, we can't forget. What I got out of these creators wanting to start up Image was that they were working on properties that did not belong to them. So they were basically doing work for a corporation, for a company where, they were getting paid, but these weren't their creations. So they wanted to go and do work for themselves with characters that they created, so they'd have full creative control. And we know that with McFarlane and Larson, that stuck. Those two comics are still being published, still being produced. Lee, it looked like it took a couple of things till Wildcats is still popular, and I think that's mostly because of Grifter and probably Zealot when drawn right. But he came out with a whole slew from his studio. He had a bunch of books. Valentino did pretty well with Shadowhawk, and Silvestri seemed to just want to throw a bunch of things at a wall and see what stuck. So, I applaud him for taking that gamble. I'm pissed at him for doing it because it caused my Marvel stock to drop immensely. But, you do what you got to do.
Well, the thing with that is if you notice, as soon as times went hard, they actually turned their back on these characters that they wanted to go off and create. So I don't know if it's so much the fact that they wanted to have creative control over these characters, or if they just wanted a bigger cut of the pie.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No. You're right. That's better said than anything I was trying to go with. You're right. And don't forget because a few years later you had Liefeld and Lee come back to work on Marvel's flagship heroes, except for Spider-Man. So it didn't take long for them to come back home, so to speak.
Well, I've heard in interviews that one of the reasons why Todd McFarlane wanted to have his own Spider-Man book was because he was tired of drawing other people's work, and he wanted to be able to work on it himself. Eventually, when he went to Image, he was actually working on his own character, but he wanted to draw his own Spider-Man and write his own Spider-Man. Eventually, he goes to Image, he writes his own character, he draws his own character, but then slowly but surely backs out of it. Rob Liefeld had Youngblood.
Yeah, and then Brigade, and every single X-Men clone or knockoff. See, you could have a long-running top 5 of X-Men clones that are found in Youngblood and Brigade, Derek. Either McFarlane suffers from ADD or he's just a child in a man's body, because he plays with something and then, okay, I'm tired of it, and he just leaves it alone. He did it with Spidey.
Yeah.
He did it with Spawn. his toy line, not so much. I mean, is he still buying baseballs? Because I know he, is that a phase that's done, or?
The last baseball he bought was
because he bought
McGuire's
and Sosa's, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's co-owner of the National
That's
Hockey
right.
League's Edmonton Oilers.
So I mean, I'm sure he's a very smart businessman. He's not poor by any means of the imagination. So
I'm going to have to disagree with you there, Dave.
with the smart part,
Yeah.
okay.
He bought rights to the Eclipse characters,
Yeah, okay, thank you. All right,
and
good.
he has not done anything with them except for an appearance of the Heap in Hellspawn, I believe, and an appearance of Mickey Moran, and also in Hellspawn. I mean, there are like hundreds of other characters that he owns that he's doing nothing with.
But wasn't
What
was
even
it?
get
me
started
see-
on the Miracle Man
I know he was.
situation.
Speaking of Miracle Man, though, real quick, isn't that constipated Miracle Man statue you have from McFarlane Studios?
Actually, yes, it is.
Okay.
But you know what? That's a good thing. And damn you for paying attention. But I'm not including Miracle Man in that because that is just so convoluted. They won't have that straightened out, in my estimation, for at least another 25 years. And then by
Wow,
that
really?
time, nobody will really
yeah.
care. But
So
I mean, there's
you don't think Gaiman working for Marvel might expedite anything regarding that?
no.
I think honestly, I think the minute that Gaiman gives up on this is the minute that Gaiman retires. He's gonna be focused upon this. This is a part of him that this feud between him and McFarlane has been going on for a long
But it's
time
it's
now.
not just
It's not over
Gaiman,
just
though.
Miracle
It's
Man, over other
also
stuff.
it's also, I think, doesn't Alan Davis have a stake, or did he give up his rights?
I believe he gave up his stake, but don't quote me on that.
I know all the people
I
that
think
are
he's out of
involved:
it for now.
Davis, Leach, Des Skin.
Mick Anglo claims that he still owns the rights, and he never gave them up in the first place.
Yeah.
And what about what was it? Dean Mulaney? Does anybody from Eclipse claim any ownership?
Yeah, actually, I think one of the co-creators still says that he never gave up ownership in the first place.
That would be Leach.
That would be Gary Leach. Okay, so
Okay, yeah. Then he claims that it all still belongs to him.
Well,
and
Well,
he
that's
never gave
that's
up
the
the
same
rights in
thing
the first
Mick Anglo
place, but-
says. He's the original creator.
Yeah.
he's okay. And the since you've read the entire series, Derek, have any, with the exception of Shaken's cover or Chuck Beecham's cover or anything have any American creators worked on any of those issues, or were they all reprints or done by British creators?
Where's John Title been from?
He might be a Brit because he was working on Swamp Thing, but I'll get back to you.
Yeah. Hold on, let me grab them real quick since they're right within arm's reach.
Of course they are.
I'm actually looking up. It's okay. Let's see. His Wikipedia. Thank you very much, Wikipedia. You're my friend. He is from Pennsylvania. John Titleman is from Erie,
Check
Pennsylvania.
that out. I have 2 copies of Miracle
Yep.
Man #1. Yeah, I
Oh,
only thought I had
My
one.
best friend. I really am.
Buddy,
Let's
pal,
see,
amigo.
Shaken. Jim Starlin did a cover.
Yes, that was a pretty funky cover. I like that cover.
Okay.
Paul Gulacy did a cover. Rick Veitch wrote the birth story.
Okay.
Oh, who's this guy?
So then people can...
John K. Snyder III, he did a cover.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, I mean, there are Americans who've done stuff. Because it's a British character and British writers, it's
The claim
mostly
might not hold
singles.
much water, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, when given a choice between Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane, when it comes to focusing more upon their love for comics, which do you feel is more about the comics, and which do you feel is more about the business? I mean, I would go McFarlane on that because Liefeld.
No, wait.
Well, he's still
who's
drawing.
more for comics and who's more for business? Liefeld's more for comics. Even though he had the story option for Will Smith, he had, he keeps coming up with different studios and different characters and creators, but for the most part, I get the feeling he lives to draw. He wants a pencil in his hand. He wants a piece of paper to draw on. He likes to create comic books. It'd be nice if one of his characters became an action figure or something like that, I'm sure. but I think he's more into he just wants to draw comics.
Plus, I think he's smart enough to know that he's not the world's greatest writer, so that when he decided to bring back Youngblood a few years ago, he got, Alan Moore.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, okay, I'm no dummy. If this is going to get off the ground, I'm going to have to get the best out there.
And the fact that Alan Moore was willing to do it with Rob Liefeld proves that, well, obviously there's got to be some... I mean, he had to have seen Rob Liefeld's passion for this, because Alan Moore doesn't work with just anybody. So, I mean, unless there was one hell of an enticing offer there, which I'm sure there was, but you could certainly understand why he wanted to do that with him. And also, looking at Youngblood, looking at the cover to Youngblood issue 1, I forget who the character's name is with the arrows, but
John
Shaft. Yeah, Shaft.
Yeah, shut your mouth.
No, I'm serious. I think his
complicated
first
man.
name really is
He's a complicated
John.
man.
Really?
I think so.
Dude. That's just so wrong on so many levels.
But he is totally a clone of Shatterstar. Looking at his outfit, looking at his face, and looking at his hair.
Yeah, and that
is Shatterstar.
that mask.
Yeah,
I used to love that that
it's
mask,
the exact same thing.
retainer, to hockey headset kind of thing. I don't, what the hell was up with those head ornaments everybody wore?
Well, see, a lot of characters, a lot of superheroes at the time needed dental surgery. So
I want to get through the Youngblood stuff and the Image stuff so I can talk about something decent, or so Derek about something decent, and we can focus on, say, Milestone.
Well, let's talk about Fighting American for a minute, just to... No, I kid. Well, let's just go over Fighting American for 3 seconds, just to say the words. Fighting American were the leftover scripts from Captain America. That's it. That's the only reason why they came out. We all know that.
I liked Rob Liefeld's run on Captain America. I have every single issue.
my
You
God.
have the Braille issues, or these were...
I actually went out. No,
Did you just have the
I
scripts,
actually went out and I
or-
bought Fighting American simply because I wanted to continue the story.
Nice.
Because
And
it was
the story? Was it a good story
Wow.
though? I mean, was it
it was different.
okay?
I mean, a lot of people were upset because who was it? Mark Waid and Ron Garney had gotten kicked off the title.
Yep. And I don't
Yeah.
blame.
I'm not a Mark Waid fan, so it really didn't break my heart.
Okay. Well, hey, there's people of all shapes and sizes out there. I'm sure there were plenty of fans of Rob Liefeld's Captain America. And, well,
Yeah,
you're
I'm
one
just
of
the
those,
only
so
one who's
there you
vocal
go.
enough to say it.
I got your back.
Yes, exactly. Now, since you're a fan of it, I have to ask you, what cup size does Captain America wear?
Was it Double D
Yeah, Jesus. Yes.
or Triple J? I mean, yeah, I know which picture you're talking about, and
Uh-huh.
that does look ridiculous, but
He's
Like I said-
but see, and pictures like that, it's
But
like he doesn't have an eraser on his pencil. It's like when it's like someone putting so many coats of paint on a
Yeah.
room, it just keeps getting smaller. It's like, dude, back away from the
Yeah.
lead, from the ink. Just draw your line,
Uh-huh.
put the pencil down, walk away.
like
hear
I
ya.
said,
I
look,
hear ya.
take a really
Yeah,
good
but-
look at Charlie Brown the next time you see. All right.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know what? One of the parts of the question that you asked in the first place, Derek, is, why is it that they get most of the blame for what happened in the '90s? And I mean, who else out there? I mean, is there that people should be thinking about when they think of the speculator era? I mean,
I wouldn't look at him from the speculator aspect of it, but you got Jim Shooter,
Yeah, I was
only
just going to
because-
say that.
yeah,
only because he wasn't at Marvel or DC, but he, there were incentives for people that were reading books from the Valiant universe. You had coupons in Harbinger and in some of their other books where you could get an issue 0. Eventually they got smart and they just released issue 0s before series started. You had actually the Unity series. I think the first issue was they printed the 0 part of the crossover, the 0 issue, for the amount of orders, and they were only going to print up enough copies for those that ordered the first part. So if you found out about the series and wanted to see how it ended, but you didn't get in on it when it started, then you might have been SOL. They were doing some freaky things with some of their printing runs. The stories were
Yeah.
great. I really enjoyed early Valiant a lot. and I followed Shooter to Defiant. I did not follow him to Broadway because I was, for the most part, out of comics at the time, but I enjoyed what he was doing with Defiant. I enjoyed Warriors of Plasm. I enjoyed Dogs of War. I enjoyed Charlemagne. The Good Guys was a decent read. I remember a lot of his stuff. I think he's a damn good writer.
And I think that also, well, I mean, one of the reasons why Valiant eventually ended up collapsing was because of trying to get Shooter out of there. Because Shooter knew what he was doing with the company. After that, they sort of lost their way.
To a certain degree, yeah, they did lose their way, and they were treading water, I think. And Acclaim came in and helped out, and even after that, even after Acclaim came on, they still tried to do some things. I mean, Quantum and Woody, I have in a drawer right next to me that I can't wait to start reading once I get the chance. And everybody that has ever talked about Quantum and Woody talks about how great this series was. Yeah, Christopher Priest, who's a damn fine writer, and you had his pretty much his always partner in crime. You had Mark Bright, so you really can't go wrong with that book. They revamped Shadowman again. I don't know if Magnus was still being printed. I believe Turok was still out there somewhere. So I mean,
well, Turok definitely was. Turok eventually
right. Well, these were all acclaimed.
Quantum
and Woody was acclaimed. Shadowman was acclaimed after a while. I mean, pretty much. I don't think there was any Valiant after a while. I think they just changed the name to Acclaim, and that's everything was printed under the Acclaim banner. And the Sliders
comics. Sliders comics. That's actually, the Sliders miniseries. I think there were 4 issues of that came out. There was a 5th issue that was completely finished, but was never released because Acclaim went under. You could find online on the internet somewhere. But those were actually really good. If you were a fan of the series and if you were a fan of Sliders, pick up the issues if you can. You can get them.
And also, not so much speculating wise, but definitely what I perceive as a gimmick is Dark Horse's Greatest World. 16 comics, all $1, for 4 different issues featuring 4 different areas of a universe that they created, and it brought you characters like Ghost and Barbed Wire and
Agents of Law.
Thank you. Nice art, because I remember Frank Miller's covers on one of them. Who was the guy who had the red X on his mask? Was it just X?
Yeah.
Ooh,
okay.
It was X.
So I mean, they had some decent ideas, and even Mike Richardson has stated recently it may have been the wrong time for that, and they would like to revisit it sometime down the line, maybe when they can devote the right resources to it, and it might make a return, because I thought it was a pretty decent idea. And you had DC doing their little things. I mean, DC wasn't alone with polybagging. We mentioned Robin. You had Superman 75, Funeral for a Friend, with the armband and the Tombstone cover, and I mean they were bagging stuff that you weren't able to see what was inside.
Well, and I hated that too with the Superman, the Death of Superman, and all that. When I first got it, I didn't pick that up until afterwards, because I was like, I want to read this, and I don't want to buy this and first have to buy another copy, because then I'm going on a kid's allowance at the time. And it took me a long time to finally, get it up and be like, all right, fine, I'm gonna go out there and buy this. I'm just gonna rip it open. I'm gonna read every single one of the issues. And I have the trade paperback of The Return of Superman. I have the trade paperback of Death of Superman, because most of those issues I decided not to get at the time for that very reason, that they were polybagged. Even then, I realized, I want to read these comics.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's the same thing. If I buy a polybagged comic, I'm opening it because I'm buying comics to read. I'm not looking to put myself through college.
And I'm officially
there you
graduated
go.
from college, so I'm not looking for that either anymore. So, well, what about you, Derek? I mean, what other names do you look at when thinking of the 90s and the quote unquote bad parts of the 90s?
I believe wasn't Tom DeFalco the editor in chief at Marvel at the time?
Yes, he was.
So he was the one who was actually signing off on all these variant covers. Was it J.M. Campbell who was doing all the not J.M. Campbell. J.M. Campbell's a podcaster.
Yes, Jeffrey Scott Campbell from Gen 13.
Thank you. That's what I was thinking.
No.
Yeah, let's play.
And you should listen to Geek 4x4.
Yeah.
Yes, you should. Geek 4x4. Wow, we have our blooper. Awesome.
Jeffrey Scott Campbell didn't do all 13 covers though, because I remember the Rolling Stone cover with that mocked Janet Jackson, but it was grunge holding up Fairchild. That was drawn by Jason Pearson.
Yeah, but he's the one who signed off on all of them. He had to be the one who approved them because they were his characters, weren't they?
Who?
Scott Campbell.
No, they were Jim Lee's characters. Gen 13 was created by Jim Lee and I think Brandon Choi.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I thought. Okay.
But J. Scott Campbell could draw boobs, so that's why they had him do the book.
Good job to have. Jay Lee. Jay Lee is one I also blame a lot because of Hellshock #1. Do you guys remember Hellshock #1?
I have that mini. I don't think I ever read it, but I have the mini.
Okay, the Hellshock #1 featured 14 pages of story and art.
Yes, I remember this. Yes.
I remember being so pissed.
And wasn't it like a $2.50 book or $2 1/4?
Yeah, it was one of the more expensive ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, who was it? McFarlane even apologized the next month saying, something like this will never, ever happen again. We're sorry that it got past us in the first place. Oh, my God. So, and on top of that, I also blame people like Howard Porter, because you're probably thinking, Howard Porter, didn't he do JLA? He's a pretty good artist.
Before he did JLA, though, he was on the Ray.
Thank you. I was getting to that. Ray 13, one of the worst comic books I've ever read. And if you don't believe me, listen to Comic Book Noise number 25. I do a review on it.
And it's a damn good review.
Oh, my God.
Actually, and if you go to Christopher Priest's website at digital-priest.com, you will see the first 10 or so pages of that issue, because even Priest is not happy with how that issue came out.
He shouldn't be. He should be ashamed of himself.
But Howard Porter went from the Ray. He also did the Underworld Unleashed mini.
Which was a horrible idea, by the way. It's because DC had hit a home run for years and years by putting out these summer events, these big major crossovers, and they were working and they were selling. So they said, hey, let's keep going. And they ran out of ideas years ago. But hey, let's boost up all the powers of our supervillains and have this guy who, for some reason, always reminded me of Mephisto from Marvel.
Yes.
And
he reminded me though also of Count Nefarious.
Yeah,
the Avengers villain.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just like, okay, if you guys are out of ideas, don't do the crossover.
Speaking of crossovers, Infinity Gauntlet.
I enjoyed the whole idea of it. I mean, the whole, people are dead, they disappeared, and then they'll be back by the end of the 6th issue. That kind of annoyed me a little bit, but overall, I enjoyed what Jim Starlin was doing there. And I would have liked to see Perez finish the book, but you can't go wrong with Ron Lim. And it freed Perez up for later on to do Saxon Violence.
And actually, Spider-Man's quote-unquote evil version was so popular, and they kept him around. He was in Maximum Carnage.
Didn't they also come out with like the Demogoblin or something like that during this?
Demogoblin, yeah.
Like, getting back to DeFalco briefly, aside from being editor-in-chief, he was also writing Fantastic Four with art by Paul Ryan. He was, I don't know if he was still writing Spidey at the time. They eventually said bye-bye to Tom DeFalco as far as editor-in-chief goes, and they gave the job to Bob Harris, which I think might even be almost at that level of, oh God, how bad is this level of Tom DeFalco. I didn't think Harris was a decent editor-in-chief at all.
He was not. Actually, in fact, for me, DeFalco was not doing too bad. He was trying his best to try and hang in there a bit, but Harris just completely put it under for the 90s for me. Because also, if I'm remembering this correctly, and you can go to the Riley papers to find this out for sure, but I'm pretty sure Bob Harris was one of the people who decided, let's make the Clone Saga longer. Let's keep this going as long as possible.
Okay, I never read the Clone Saga. All I have read is from a book called Spider-Man: The Ultimate Guide, written by Tom DeFalco, which gives a synopsis of the Clone Saga. And quite frankly, just reading his brief overview, it actually seemed like it was a really good idea because they shook everything up.
It
and
was.
I'm just wondering what happened.
Go online and go to. In fact, actually, let me double check to make sure that it is indeed the Riley papers.
And
I've
the
mentioned this many
episode
times.
2, Comic Book Noise 25, and the most recent episode where Derek also mentions the Tom DeFalco's book will be in the show notes as well.
Yes,
and I
yes,
think a lot of
without a doubt.
flack Tom DeFalco caught was because he was the EIC after Jim Shooter.
Yeah, Life of Riley. That's the name of the that's the name of it. It's a 35-part article covering the storyline, including behind-the-scenes information from Glenn Greenberg, who was part of the editorial team during the time, and interviews with other writers. So, Life of Riley is where you want to go for that to get the entire rundown of what exactly went wrong in the Clone Saga. If you haven't read that, it's really detailed. I read all 35 parts. It's really,
Those lonely Saturday nights, huh?
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much there, sir. The death of Superman.
It was a slow news day across the country,
which
is why it was picked up by every news source and
across
newspapers.
Across the world,
and
really.
People wanted to run out, and the people that wanted to run out and buy this and read it haven't read comics in years, if they did at all, and they all thought that this was legit. They thought Superman was dying. There's no way in hell he's ever coming back from this.
And I'm sorry, but they got a crappy comic book.
Yes, they did.
That comic book could be read in 5 minutes if you read each page twice. And
there were more double-page spreads in that issue, or just really big, wonky panels that just went across 2 pages.
Jergens went to town.
And I mean,
work on that. You know,
he when he's on, he's a damn fine illustrator. Also, when he's paired with the right inker, right embellisher.
Yeah, hey, his Captain America.
His Captain America and the Falcon was decent. I wasn't a fan of his most recently with Andy Lanning finishing his pencils on the back of 52. But I wasn't real keen on the whole. You know, why was Doomsday created to kill him off? I mean, there could have been so many other different. I guess because it had to be physical. I don't know. I just wasn't real keen on Doomsday being the one to kill him off.
And combined with that, you know, the reason behind the death of Reed Richards in the comic books, which obviously did not stick around either, was obviously because of the death of Superman. And Marvel Comics felt that, hey, you know, their death worked. We could totally go with the death here. And a combination of, you know, the Clone Saga was long because of the death of Superman being as popular and Age of Apocalypse being popular, which was actually a really good series and was probably the best marketing gimmick of the 90s by far was the Age of Apocalypse. But the death of Reed Richards, that is a low time in the history.
Did anybody really buy that?
No,
I have every single issue.
Were you suckered into the story?
Oh, did I buy it?
Think that Reed Richards was dead?
For 5 minutes. For 5 minutes. Because, you know why? Because both Dr. Doom and Reed were gone.
But that's not the first time. That's not the first time I've ever seen Sue reach out to the ground saying Reed, thinking that, you know, her husband is gone.
Yeah. And, I mean, eventually, you know, after about maybe 2 issues or 3 issues, I'm like, yeah, this is not going to last. But for the first issue, the shock value was there, and I was just like, yeah, wow. Because this, you know, at the time, I wasn't as jaded as I am today. When somebody dies today in the Marvel Comics, I'm like, so how many issues until he's back?
We talked about that yesterday.
And, you know, now that might be the case. Back in the 90s, however, it was at least a little bit for me, wow, this guy's dead. I can't believe they did that. That's amazing.
What about the 2099 series? You had Spider-Man 2099, Ravage, Stan Lee's big return to comics, Punisher, and Doom.
Yeah. Well, Doom was great. Doom 2099 with Warren Ellis writing it was
I never
fantastic.
read that, but I did enjoy Miguel O'Hara as Spider-Man. I thought Peter David and Rick Leonardi made a great team.
Never read it.
Well, anything David, I'll pick up.
I think the only thing 2099 I read was that that series of one-shots a few years ago that Robert Kirkman did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that wasn't 2099. That wasn't 2099. That was 2099, but that was not the 2099. that was them calling it 2099 to have a 10th anniversary, but those were not the characters. It was entirely different. So if you can find the old Spidey 99 or even Fantastic Four 2099, I didn't mind too bad. Even though for some reason they were our Fantastic Four, and that's what really confused me about it. But Punisher wasn't too bad. Hulk was not too bad. Spidey was not too bad. Those comics were actually pretty decent for their time. So if you can find them, I think they have a trade of at least some of them. I'm not entirely sure.
No, was this before or after Fantastic Force? Do you guys remember that comic?
That was FORCE?
Yeah, no, I do. When Franklin Richards all of a sudden became a teenager. Which in my head was actually sort of like, wow, he's a teenager. So technically, you could say he aged normally. Now he's back to being like 4 in the comic books. And I was one of the maybe 3 people who actually really enjoyed him as a teenager. I felt that character really worked. But when they, retconned it back to being 4 again, I thought that was a total cop-out. But then again, that's what a lot of the 90s was, cop-outs. But what are you going to do?
Yeah, I hate it when they do that to characters. Like, was it Valeria Richards?
Yeah. Yes.
I actually liked her when she was a young adult. Before they said, hey, let's bring her in continuity for real, only as a baby.
That was Pacheco back when he was writing it, correct? I'm not sure whether he was still doing art at the time, but I know he did at least the plots for it then. So, how about the
Ultraverse was fantastic.
Malibu? Oh, yeah.
No, I really enjoyed Nightman. I enjoyed Firearm, and I thought Solitaire was kick-ass.
The only thing that I regret about Firearm is I never picked up the videotape.
The videotape, yep. I want the videotape zero issue.
Yeah, because that was
Go ahead.
That was my first exposure to James Robinson, who's one of those guys to me who can do no wrong. He's those guys, if I see his name on a book, I'm picking it up.
So that would be one of the things in the 90s you'd like to come back, and if done properly, you'd love to see the Ultraverse back, right?
I'm glad that the Ultraverse to a certain degree. I could do without Mantra. Okay. I kind of got a kick out of Hard Case. Prime was good.
Especially
Prime
was my
Norm
favorite.
Breyfogle art. Who was that one character that was it Dustin Gwen used to do the art for? It was just really weird looking. I think he was someone that teamed up with Mantra. But the characters that I mentioned, I thought, Rune. I wish I wanted to finish the damn story with Rune. I never got all 8 or 10 parts or whatever the hell it was for that event. But they looked like they were going somewhere. But it was a nice idea. But Marvel Comics had years and years and years of this history that you can draw back on. So people invested their time in this universe. You can't expect that to happen overnight and expect so many. Why do we have so few readers? Why isn't everybody buying this? And what can we do? You can't do anything to speed that up. It's got to happen naturally. It's got to be a natural progression, I think.
Well, I felt that the minute that Marvel, made
that was so the sign at the beginning of the end.
That was it.
What was it?
That was it. I forget whether it was Exiles or the all-new Exiles that had Juggernaut as a member of the team. The first time that he was technically good, by the way. Everybody forgets that, that Juggernaut had his good years even before Chuck Austen made him good.
They had really, really decent creators. It was a great idea. As far as things that I'm glad that stuck around from the 90s, the coloring, because that from what I've read, Marvel scooped up Malibu for the computer coloring. And, regardless of what they were going to do with the characters, they liked what they were doing as far as the coloring of the comics. Aside from the Ultraverse, I'd love to see the old Valiant and Defiant books come back.
For me, it would be Milestone.
Thank you, Jesus Christ.
We haven't.
I mentioned it before, No, and I mentioned it before
Milestone
because I wanted Derek to go into it, and because I didn't stick with Milestone all the way to the end, but I was there in the beginning. I didn't read Zombie. I read the main 4, and I probably stopped reading Icon before Rocket gave birth. I don't know. I know, and hopefully I'll find some this weekend. I didn't I didn't stick with Static. I mean, I read Worlds Collide. I thought that was a pretty funky crossover, but it was shortly after the crossover with the Superman titles that I was kind of had to cut back big time on what I was buying.
Yeah, Milestone was just one of those things that I don't know if they were 5 years too early or 5 years too late, but their timing was just really bad. I mean,
I say 5 years too early. Today Milestone would work. I really think it would. With the way that the comic book community is now, and with the way that we've sort of accepted, the world of well, even more now than ever. Wildstorm's doing pretty damn well on its own. Vertigo's doing damn well on its own. Milestone would totally be able to work.
And if they were around the same time as the Eclipse and First and those kind of things, they would have also been on a little stronger footing also. But I think they started coming up when these other companies were falling off. Yeah. So, anyway, a lot of people think of it as like just, the black comic book universe when it wasn't. It was mostly black creators, but it was the heroes were truly diverse. Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of people just completely forget about or just disregard. This should be an entire show by itself, guys.
Well, now we know what you'll be talking about next time you're on.
Well,
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'll have to go back and get some of the Milestone issues myself. But I feel that also, the diversity that Milestone did bring is something that I feel that comics are still benefiting from today, because it proved that not every character has to be a white American.
Or a white alien. You don't have to be a white alien from Krypton. You can be an alien from another planet, and the first person you see happens to be black.
A slave, right?
Yeah. So I mean, it just and the
also,
stories made sense.
And also, what a lot of people forget is that Icon was pretty much the first time you saw a sympathetic black Republican in comics. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's simply because, the Republicans were the party of Lincoln, and that was his party, and he stuck with it for 100 years or so.
Yeah.
But you left right around the time that Rocket gave birth.
Yeah.
So you missed the replacement Rocket and Icon and the Oblivion storyline and
yeah.
Those were some.
I remember the Luke Cage spoof.
Yeah, Buck Wild.
That's great. That was I used to. Off air or via email, you'll have to tell me what the relation is, if they really established a relation between DMZ and Icon.
That's one of those stories they never told.
Okay, and did the Milestone universe end with a whimper? Is it still going on? Like, do you think you could actually see Dakota characters appear in the DCU proper, and it would make sense? Or do you think that that there's no way?
I think that it depends on the characters. Now that they've finished with Infinite Crisis and Superboy's done hitting the wall.
Right.
I don't see why you can't bring people like the Big Four. The Icon, the Icon and Rocket, Static, and Hardware would be the first ones I would bring over. Period.
Okay.
And then then you start hearing about this, the Shadow Cabinet, and you hear about Blood Syndicate, which really ended with a whimper.
Did it? Damn. Started off so strong too.
It started off with them. Pretty much superpowered street gang protecting its turf.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended with them going into the land of the Monkey King to rescue one of their compatriots. It was bad. Anyway, but
call me crazy, by the way, but I think Static could totally work on the Outsiders.
I could see him working on the Titans more than the Outsiders.
Really? Okay, because
he doesn't have
I don't know,
the experience.
Like for some reason,
I mean, and I'm not. That's not a knock to Static. He hasn't. he doesn't have the foothold. He's not Nightwing. He's not Batman's protege. He's not Green Arrow's protege. He doesn't, he's not. Okay. He's met Superman. He's worked with Icon and he's got some experience. But I think I could see him even relating to, although I'm not reading The Outsiders with 1 year later right now, but before then, I could see him hanging with Bart and learning from Vic and and goofing around with Beast Boy if need be. But I don't think I see him on The Outsiders.
No, because The Outsiders
think he's too young.
Well, The Outsiders, the way they are now, or the way they were before 1 year later, because I also haven't picked it up, they could get bloodthirsty if they needed to. And I don't see Static as that kind of a character.
Okay. All right. See, you know what my problem is? I think because I saw the older Static on Justice League Unlimited,
We're not talking cartoon. This is the real stuff.
I know. But that's the thing, because I did read a couple of the Static issues from back in the day in Milestone, but because I saw him on the animated, it sort of corrupted my mind a little bit here. So you're right, he probably would be better off with the Teen Titans. We have, by the way, we have some forum posts that we should probably get to before time runs out here, as we're already at about an hour and 30 minutes here. The first post that we had was from Lobo, and I'm going to take some snippets here as he mentioned some stuff that was actually some posts that were on the old Comic Geek Speak forum, but let me get to the meat and potatoes of his post here. Jim Shooter was just trying to jumpstart a new company, and obviously he's talking about Valiant here. It's not like he did a whole month of 0 issues like DC or a whole month of -1 issues like Marvel. I don't remember any polybagged issues like X-Force #1 with 5 different trading cards or Superman #75, the Death issue. I don't remember any die-cut covers like Wolverine's #500 or hologram cover month like the Spider-Man titles. I have Ghost Rider, Spectre, and Batman comics with glow-in-the-dark covers. Defiant never released a comic with 5 different covers, including a gatefold cover like X-Men #1 or the multiple variant covers for Spider-Man #1. I don't remember seeing any collectible signed and numbered Defiant covers on QVC. This doesn't even touch on Marvel buying Malibu Comics and canceling the Ultraverse comics, or Marvel suing Defiant Comics into bankruptcy by claiming Warriors of Plasm infringed on Marvel's lame Plasmer title, or Marvel buying Heroes World, causing comics distributors across the country to go out of business, resulting in the Diamond Comics monopoly we have today. If the Dark Age refers to the boom and bust of the 90s, I hope that DC and Marvel have their rightful positions as industry leaders. So, Lobo certainly has a interesting case there about how, well, basically, as you mentioned before, David, Valiant and, well, later on Defiant didn't really fit into the whole, 800,000 different covers thing that Marvel and DC and other companies were doing at the time.
They were interested in telling stories. They weren't doing what Marvel and DC were trying to do. And he mentions Heroes World and Marvel trying to have its own distribution. And while not at this distribution warehouse, I do remember a lot of ads in the comic books, in Wizard, wherever, for American entertainment, which helped add to that speculator craze because they were trying to sell signed copies. This was before Dynamic Forces became as big as they are. They tried to sell signed copies. They would sell multiple issues. They would sell you the whole set of the Robin miniseries, for not a cheap price, but maybe a little more than cover. And they helped just fan that flame where if you read about this comic in Wizard and you think it's going to be hot, then you can buy it from us because we're going to have hundreds of thousands of copies of it. I see if I can find some of those old postcards or interior ads and see if I can scan them in.
All I remember is the advertisement that included the Marvel Comics swimsuit special that that they were hawking like nobody's business because, well, back then art sold, and hey, if you showed art of pretty Marvel Comics women in bikinis, obviously.
I don't know if Marvel came out with that first or Wildstorm. If Jim Lee's studio did that first, but speaking of the swimsuit issue, a couple of magazines that I really enjoyed, which I got a kick out of, were the Marvel Year in Review magazines, which were a takeoff of. The cover looked like a Time magazine, and the articles inside were basically it was just the year in review, and the articles were written by like characters in the Marvel Universe. You'd have pictures drawn, and it would say, photographed by Peter Parker, Daily Bugle, and that was neat. I enjoyed it. I have 2 of them. I don't know how many years they continued it. I thought those magazines were pretty nifty.
Those could work today. Those would certainly. I think that they could probably end up.
They could,
today.
but you'd also get so much of that on the internet, which is probably why they don't release Marvel Age.
Actually, how about putting that on Marvel's website? Maybe like Marvel.com has a little segment of the Daily Bugle even, and have some articles similar to something like what they're doing with the
Right. I was just going to say that, absolutely. The whatchamacallit, you have. If it came to like actual Marvel propaganda, I would love to see like the Marvel Age magazine come back, because that was basically just bi-weekly or once a month magazine. It was a quarter, and it was basically just upcoming things that Marvel is coming out with over the next couple of months. And I thought it was pretty neat at the time. I mean, this was before everybody could get on the internet, so it lasted as long as it could. And with technology and the advent of everything else, things move along.
Well, that's part of the world. Everything always ends up moving along to one place or another eventually. Indeed. We got a post here from Equinox.
Excellent.
That I definitely want to share, as Equinox has been requested, and we will have him on the show at one point or another. Thank you very much for that, Braxton. You're the man. Anyway, I think that Todd and Rod are the people that most look to as the cause of the 90s bust, because they were some of the most vocal people in the industry at the time. As we all know, there were others making bold moves at the time, like Eric Larson, Jim Lee, Jim Shooter, the guys from the Legend imprint, but they were more reserved about how they presented themselves. Liefeld and McFarlane went out of their way to let everyone know who they were and how great they were. I think that Todd came through better than most because he made a point to diversify his business ventures, while Rob didn't fare so well because he was focused only on getting out books that aped his style, something that always seemed to happen behind schedule. I will admit to enjoying some of the books that came out from the Image Bunch, but I remember enjoying them the way you would enjoy a popcorn summer movie. They were entertaining, but they definitely weren't the epitome of great storytelling, but that's okay as long as you don't try to look at them as something more than what they really are. I think that comics today benefited from a change in the storytelling style so that both the words and art played a more equal part in moving the plots forward. Before the 90s, you had all sorts of narrative text along the borders of the panels. Afterward, that kind of stuff was left in the hands of the artists and their use of space, lines, and color. Personally, I would like to see a return of the comics from the Ultraverse, as we mentioned that we'd like to see at least some of them back. Unfortunately, I would prefer to see those books handled by the original creators, because I remember they made me feel like I was getting in on the ground floor of something new and special. Too bad Marvel couldn't see beyond getting Malibu's coloring process and felt they needed to cancel those books.
There you go.
A lot of what he said there does make a lot of sense, especially with the story.
And the Legend imprint, which I'm sorry I forgot all about, because those were some really good books too. You had X-Men, Hellboy, you had...
I'm sorry, is that where Sin City came from also?
Sin City was under the Legend imprint, because it was Miller, Mignola, Adams, Byrne, and I believe they might have given it to Concrete for a minute. So Paul Chadwick might have been a member as well, but Legend... And Legend, like Maverick, eventually just disappeared as an imprint, and then all the books just were under the Dark Horse logo. But he's right. I mean, you had and what was interesting is that the people that made the Legend imprint weren't these young whippersnappers like the Image guys, and they weren't somebody like Jim Shooter that might be resented in some circles. These were all established, big name guys that have done work for the big two. And for the most part, the stories they were telling were good. I mean, Hellboy's still going strong today. That might be the only one. I mean, Monkey Man and O'Brien have just kind of faded away. I mean, the end of the third issue, Adams did, say the next issue would focus on this one particular character, but it, it hasn't materialized, and we're talking about like 10 years later. Sin City is still going strong, but Next Men's pretty much dead. I think after that Byrne did Danger Unlimited and then Babe, and less said of that, I guess the better. So I mean, it's just he made some excellent points, though. I thank Chris for the post.
I certainly thank him as well. He's one of my favorite people on the forums, and one of my other favorites, Matthew Guy, has something quick to say here. The only plotline good for me from the 90s was the death of Superman and his return as the only Man of Steel. I skipped the Marvel, Indie, DC bust except for Superman titles in the 90s. I came back in full force in 2002 into comics with DC titles beyond Superman with Batman and Detective only. Then CGS happened, comic-y speak obviously. Now I have 25 plus titles a month from the big two and doing my best at saving Manhunter. Yes, save Manhunter, yay, yay, yay. So a guy who sort of skipped out in the 90s and for reasons, and for the looks of things, he just really didn't see a point to from what I'm reading into it. And Matthew, if I'm reading it wrong, then please let me know. But I do know a lot of people who did actually feel that way, where they saw all these different companies out there and didn't really know, who to follow and who was really worth their time.
I mean, I can get that from his post as well. I am curious, though, getting back to Chris's post with Equinox, as far as the storytelling. Derek, do you miss thought bubbles?
Sometimes. I mean, it makes more sense that things like thought balloons and sound effects aren't there. Sometimes the writers and the artists have the heroes saying things that, I'm just thinking, all right, why are you saying that? And you could easily just, think it.
Uh-huh.
But, it's very rare.
Yeah.
Simply because back then, people were coming out of writing styles from novels and pulp books, pulp magazines, things like that, whereas today's writers are a lot more cinematically focused.
Okay.
Everybody wants to option that really big story to Hollywood, and they have to get away from that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I kind of miss it, but I can see why it's gone.
Okay.
Well, with the disappearance of the thought bubbles, you got the appearance of the thought boxes, which, to me, feel more like inner monologues than anything else. And I really like having an inner monologue, but at the same time, I do sort of miss the, I wonder what he's really thinking, that came with the
one thing I really do miss, though, are word balloons on the covers. I know a lot of people hated them, but, there were just times where it's like, oh my God, what are you doing?
You know where you can see that most recently?
Where's that?
All-Star Superman #4.
Really?
Jimmy Olsen is running away from Superman, and there's a caption box, and Jimmy Olsen is making a statement on the cover in a word balloon.
Oh, I got to pick that one up then.
And before that, the Red Hood storyline with
Okay,
Batman.
that I missed.
Yes. Oh, no, not you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which actually, I mean, I that was so old-fashioned.
Since Matt Wagner did the cover, I don't think that phrase was really needed, because I remember seeing the picture of it without seeing the word balloon. And you can and Wagner's just got that damn good style where you can just see it in Batman's face that's exactly what he's not thinking. Oh crap, did I leave the iron on? You know what he's thinking right then and there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, to each their own with that, I guess. Now with Image, one thing that we had not mentioned yet is Eric Larson's side of Image, which obviously is still the side of Image we see today, as Eric Larson is now editor-in-chief of Image Comics. But Savage Dragon is the last original Image comic that's really still around other than Spawn, and he's the only creator who's stuck with his original creation this entire time. Since its inception, I'd say that Savage Dragon is probably one of the few comics that was as much about the story as it was about the art. There was a very good balance between the two there, and that's one of the reasons why I feel that it's really lasted as long as it has. And it's still good quality stuff even today.
Okay, I haven't picked up Savage Dragon in ages, so I'll have to take your word for it.
Okay, well, Derek, you did pick up Savage Dragon back in the day.
I actually won a eBay auction of the first 100 issues of Savage Dragon.
Nice.
Yeah, and it didn't cost anywhere near $100 either, so it was a pretty good deal.
Yes, it is.
That is a good deal, which also says how much the speculator bubble was popped. As you know, back in say 98, 99, that might have cost about 150 or something along those lines, or maybe even 200.
And, I mean, I know you want to talk about Savage Dragon, but the whole speculator bubble, I don't feel sorry for these people. Yeah. They were carpetbaggers who came in, and they pretty much destroyed our hobby. I mean, they have weakened it to the point where it's nowhere near as strong as it was. It'll probably never be that strong again because no,
at least not for
I don't think it'll. I don't think we'll ever see the days of a regular title selling. Yeah, no, I was thinking bigger of the 4 or 5 million copies that X-Men #1 sold. That'll never happen again, simply because these idiots were burned. The ones that I blame for the bad taste of the 90s are those jackasses. It's one thing to want to provide for your family. I have absolutely no problem with that. And if you can get in on the ground floor of something, I say go for it. But then don't turn around and completely trash the industry that you were going to make money off of, but were unable to. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, because a lot of people who were complaining about comics are people who lost their shirts, and the reason they lost their shirts was because they forgot basic fundamentals of economics, supply and demand. If everybody has a copy of it, it's not worth anything. Anyway.
Sure. Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, well, hey, my most expensive comic to this day is not something I got during the speculator era. It's afterwards. So there you go. Ultimate Spider-Man #1 is worth a lot these days, but it's not because of a certain amount of comics, not because it had a special cover or anything like that, because it was a damn good comic book, and it started off an entire line of comics, and that's why it's big today. But most of those speculator comics are $1.50.
My most expensive comic is Miracle Man #15. I mean, I can go and probably buy another copy for $75 to $100, but because this particular copy means so much to me personally, you can't put a price tag on it. Right. I mean,
without a doubt. Yeah. And I mean,
I have a Century Special #1, and not the guy with the long hair who's flying around with the Avengers, but the Century from Innovation Comics Hero Alliance. And that is one of my all-time favorites, and it is another one. If you want to buy that from me, we're talking triple digits, because I know nobody in their right mind is going to pay that. And if you are crazy enough to pay it, then I'm going to take your money and go out and find somebody to sell it to me for a lot cheaper.
Well, that's like people ask me, how could you possibly spend all this money on comics every single month? And I say to them, I'm not spending all this money on one comic book. I'm spending all this money on, about 100 comic books for a month, or 50 comic books for a month, depending on how big a month it is. That's why I spend so much money on these comic books. It's not that they'll be worth something someday. It's because I like reading comic books, and that's a concept that so many people don't seem to understand either. You don't buy them so that you can put them away and never look at them. You buy them because if you're interested in them, you'll buy the next issue.
Yeah,
that's what it's all about. The 90s lost its way, and now finally we're getting back to that. But like you said, we'll probably never get to the numbers that we
And with all the good stuff that's coming out today, a lot of people are not going to read it, and it's a shame.
Yeah. Well, the movies have made it so that some people who were not comic book readers or were comic book readers and dropped it after the whole 90s debacle came back. But obviously not nearly as many as there were.
Because you do see forum posts, or people that are listening to podcasts, like, listen to you guys now. I was out of it in the 90s, and now I'm back. And for me, it wasn't so much of a distaste or wow, this is just crap that's being published. A lot of it had to do with finances. I couldn't pay rent and pay my bills and have extra money left over to read comics. So a lot of it I did just cut out. I kept myself aware. If I walked into the comic shop, I would take a look at the covers. I would see what's going on. I remember I have an issue or two of one of the Age of Apocalypse X-Men issues with, I think, the Roger Cruz art, and it was interesting for what I read. I as much as it pained me at the time, or pains me to admit it, I would thumb through Wizard just to see, who was active, who was doing what. But I just couldn't afford it at the time, and so I had to bow out. And then after, I think what really drew me back in was Marvel Knights, was Quesada and Palmiotti on Daredevil, was Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon on The Punisher, and I would pick up a couple things here and there. I stayed away from the flagships mostly. I had no idea, no interest really what was going on with Spider-Man. And same thing with Batman and Superman. I kind of just waited around the shallow end of the pool to see, what was floating by that was kind of nice. And eventually I just started to get back in full swing. But, a lot of people did leave in the 90s. And sure, but like Derek said, and like you said, it's just a lot of it wasn't really good storytelling either.
Yeah, and I was obviously, I'm one of the few who maybe started his comic book career in the 90s, really, because I was young. I really got into it then, but now I consider myself a comic book reader. That's what I've been saying for years. I'm actually, I'm following storylines. I'm following specific storylines. If I don't like a book, I stop picking it up. And, I won't pick up a book just because a specific person's on it. If it's a good book, I'll read it. And, that's one of the reasons why I finally picked up Manhunter, because I love it. Not because there were anybody that I knew really who was doing the storyline on it, but because, hey, people are talking about this. Maybe I should pick it up. Wow, this is a really good story. I'm going to continue going to it. That's how I read my comic books. That's how I collect my comic books. Back in the 90s, that's not how we did it. And I'm glad to see that the comic book industry itself has gotten back to that. Yeah, so I think we pretty much said it all at this point. What do you guys think?
No stone left unturned?
Pretty much so, yeah. I mean, this was a well-deserved 2-hour episode, which sort of makes up for not having an episode last week. And we'll plug everything that you do, Derek. Give us your websites just offhand.
If you just go to deliberatenoise.com, that has links to everything else.
Well, that just made it easier for all of us. There you go. You can head on over to deliberatenoise.com, find out everything that Derek does, and there's plentiful stuff on there. Also, before we wrap things up here, I want to remind everybody that on this week's Comics Podcast crossover, Derek and David and myself are all on Comics Podcast crossover. Derek has a segment for Comic Book Noise. David and myself have a segment for Comic Timing, and David has his segment where we all did stuff on our favorite monkeys. Woohoo! Oh yeah, and that is on the Comics Podcast crossover. You can find that on iTunes, and also comicspodcast.com. It'll be on there, and also I believe it's comicspodcastcrossover.libsyn.com.
That's the feed,
the other website. So you can find, yes, exactly. You can find that all there. And, of course, we are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network over at comicspodcast.com. And one quick reminder here that Comic Timing's feed has changed. So the current feed for Comic Timing can be found over at feeds.feedburner.com/Comic Timing Podcast. That is the feed for Comic Timing. That's feeds.feedburner.com/Comic Timing Podcast. We are also on iTunes, and there is a new feed on iTunes. So the one that says David Price, Ian Levinstein is the one that you're looking for. The one that has Toby Cook on it, that's the previous one. So the one that also you'll be able to tell because one's about 3 episodes behind where we currently are. Everything's all up and running there with iTunes again and with FeedBurner, and all is well with the world. The email address for Comic Timing is comictiming@gmail.com. And don't forget to vote for us over at Podcast Alley. A link will be in the show notes and on the main page. And don't forget to give us your iTunes reviews on the proper iTunes page, por favor. And our contest to design iTunes art. The deadline is fast approaching on that. And the deadline for that is indeed August 8th. So don't forget to check that out. And also our first 22 pages review of Annihilation #1 will be coming up pretty soon.
Week from this week.
Which is August 9th. Annihilation #1 will be hitting about 2 weeks later. We'll have our review of Annihilation #1, and anybody who wants to post their comments on it, just head to the forum post about 22 pages, Annihilation #1, and give us your thoughts there. And other than that, I'm pretty sure that's everything, except for head on over to LordShaper.com, who's a affiliate of the show, and also Lord Shaper himself, Damien, is going to be having a segment for us on Comic Timing forthcoming. We'll give you information on that later on. And Derek, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for coming over and making some noise.
Thank you.
Yes, I made my pun about Price before, and now you make the pun for the noise reference, so we're all good. Yes, definitely. David, as always, it's been a pleasure, my friend. No problemo, and as always, there's always time for comics. Derek, are you going to be at any Comic-Cons coming? Or?
No, I take that back. I might try to make the Mid-Ohio Comic-Con.
Any chance of Baltimore? Or?
Actually, that is the week. That's the last 2 days of my vacation.
Oh, that's right, because you said that you're going to be waking up early, getting the kids on the bus, and going back to sleep during your vacation.
Right.
Okay.
I gotcha. Very nice. And you know what, dude? Enjoy your vacation.
Yeah.
That's the way to spend a vacation.
It's the first one I've had in
sleeping.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, dude, just relax during that vacation. You need it to just sort of, recharge your batteries.
I think we all know during that week I will probably be working on podcast stuff. since I'm not going to be bothered with the day job.